I was there. I worked with Nikola Tesla himself. And now I'm going to reveal a secret about him.
Tesla's rebellious streak came in rebelling against the whole of established science at the time. It was thought that there was no way to harness alternating current and ever make it practicable.
One night in 1899, Nikola Tesla activated a device he believed would change the world. Instead, it triggered an energy surge that warped every instrument in the lab and sent electric waves through the town. Tesla warned officials the experiment touched something outside human control. They shut him down and locked the files. More than a century later, his assistant's final account exposes what Tesla knew and why it terrified everyone who heard it. Tesla's haunting vision. Nikola Tesla spent his entire life chasing ideas that seemed impossible until the moment he proved them. But near the end of his career, he revealed a vision so unusual and so far ahead of its time that it nearly cost him everything. It began with a simple belief that electricity, the force that powered the modern world, didn't need wires, poles, or grids. Tesla was convinced it could move freely through the Earth and the atmosphere, reaching anyone, anywhere, as easily as radio signals. And the place where he tried to turn that belief into reality was a strange tower on the coast of Long Island, a place he said could light the world. Tesla's reputation was already extraordinary. His invention of alternating current had changed how cities worked, how factories ran, and how homes everywhere received power. But Tesla rarely stopped at what was practical. He always moved toward what might be possible next. By the early 1900s, that next step took shape in the form of Wardenclyffe Tower. On the surface, Wardenclyffe looked like a tall wooden structure with a round metal dome on top. Beneath it, though, were deep tunnels and chambers carved into the ground. The tower above and the tunnels below were designed to work together, sending energy through the ground and up into the sky, linking the planet's surface with the upper layers of the atmosphere. But this wasn't a dream or a guess to Tesla. It was a design he had built and tested in his mind long before any construction began. He was known for this method. He mentally assembled machines, ran them through every movement, watched for flaws, and improved them without ever touching metal. Wardenclyffe was no different. In his mind, the tower was just one point in a global network, a system of identical nodes placed around the world, each one tuned to the same natural frequencies of the Earth. If everything worked exactly as he expected, power could be sent from one place and picked up in another, without wires, without loss, and without limits. But ideas of that scale require funding, and so Tesla secured it from one of the most powerful men in America, J.P. Morgan. Tesla assured him the project was for wireless telegraphy, a technology that was already proving its value commercially. It wasn't a lie, but it also wasn't the full truth. Tesla's real ambition went much further. He intended to use the tower to transmit energy itself, not just messages. This half-truth would later become one of the main sources of tension between the two men. Investors wanted clear results, steady profits, and predictable progress. Tesla wanted a worldwide system that would change the entire nature of power. This gap between their goals created pressure that would never fully disappear. But there's an unsettling reason why Tesla was confident Wardenclyffe could work. 4 years earlier, in Colorado Springs, he had witnessed something one disturbing night that convinced him the idea was possible. And it changed the direction of his work forever. The Colorado Springs Project. In the summer of 1899, Nikola Tesla left New York and traveled west to Colorado Springs in search of a quiet stretch of open land to conduct an unsettling experiment he could not safely explore anywhere else. The altitude, the dry air, and the long horizon gave him conditions he believed were ideal for high-voltage work. And by the time he finished, what stood on that land was a small experimental station with a sharply peaked roof, a tall wooden mast, and the most powerful electrical apparatus he had ever built. Tesla kept a meticulous lab notebook throughout his stay. Page after page described exact measurements, coil configurations, sketches, dates, and observations. These entries remain one of the most reliable sources for understanding what he achieved, and the work done there would form the foundation for what he later attempted at Wardenclyffe. One of the clearest documented achievements from Colorado Springs was the scale of the electrical discharges Tesla produced. He constructed a massive coil system inside the laboratory, large enough to generate arcs that resembled natural lightning. Witnesses later described flashes that extended more than 100 feet, reaching out from the mast as the air around the building crackled with ionized light. Tesla noted in his book that the energy flowing through the coil occasionally became so strong that it eventually overwhelmed the local power system. Fuses at the towns, generating plant blue, cutting electricity to parts of Colorado Springs until repairs were made. But it wasn't just Tesla who witnessed the strange anomalies that night. Residents would later report unusual signs of the experiments. Sparks sometimes jumped from metal objects embedded in the soil, surprising anyone who touched them. Telegraph lines in the area experienced bursts of interference strong enough to disrupt messages. In fact, farmers reportedly spoke about livestock reacting to stray electrical currents. Tesla's equipment reached voltage ranges few laboratories of the era could even approach that night, and the effects spread far beyond the walls of his building. This project also produced one of the most significant demonstrations of Tesla's entire career: wireless illumination. Using tuned circuits and the natural conductivity of the ground, he placed bulbs at a distance from the lab and managed to make them glow without wires. At a time when electricity was barely understood and rarely seen outside experimental setups, this felt like magic. In his notebook, he drew simple diagrams of the setup and described the event directly, referring to the effect as lamps lit by telluric currents traveling through the earth. But the line of investigation in the Colorado Springs project that would eventually inspire the Wardenclyffe Tower project was centered on the idea of Earth resonance. Tesla strongly believed that the planet behaved like a massive electrical body with natural frequencies, much like a bell or tuning fork. If these frequencies could be identified and excited, energy could be transmitted efficiently and recovered at distant points, an idea he would attempt to prove 4 years later in Wardenclyffe. He built equipment capable of sending controlled electrical pulses deep into the ground, then measured the returning signals to see how the Earth responded. The notebook entries describe these tests repeatedly. Tesla observed patterns he interpreted as resonant effects, delayed echoes, rhythmic fluctuations, and changes in voltage amplitude that suggested the electrical energy had traveled outward and then returned. Tesla believed he had detected the first evidence of a planetary electrical rhythm, and this belief would guide nearly everything he pursued afterward. Tesla also wrote that he witnessed standing wave patterns during his Colorado work. In waves of any kind, from sound to water or even electricity, a standing wave appears when energy reflects back and overlaps with itself in stable, repeating patterns. In his notes, Tesla described a pulsing effect he noticed one night, and it convinced him that the entire Earth might be able to hold these standing electrical waves. If that idea were true, then a transmitter in one location could send out energy that would settle into stable points all around the planet, and any device tuned to those points could tap into that energy. These standing wave observations became the theoretical backbone for Tesla's later designs. Colorado Springs had shown him the hints, but none of it was yet a complete system. None of it proved a global network was possible. Yet it showed enough consistency to justify the next step. The Colorado laboratory was the prototype. Wardenclyffe, built 4 years later, was meant to be the scaled-up version capable of reaching real-world distances. But then this discovery would attract the attention of people Tesla never intended to alert. Competitors and government observers began taking notice. Reports of enormous discharges, interference with communication lines, and unpredictable electrical effects had already started circulating, and companies aligned with Thomas Edison, Tesla's biggest rival, paid unusually close attention. They were concerned that his progress might open a path toward technologies capable of threatening the existing power systems they controlled. As word spread, pressure increased from institutions that wanted clearer explanations of what Tesla was planning next. And so Tesla would attempt to embark on another project, the next phase of his work, the Wardenclyffe Tower. But this project would lead to the beginning of the end of a career. It was a turning point where scientific pressure, financial strain, and personal demands all began to collide. The pressure begins. When Tesla began attempting to recreate what he had done earlier with Colorado Springs, the backlash and pressure became intense. The first sign of trouble was money. J.P. Morgan, who had funded the project, ended the support suddenly. Checks were stopped, orders for materials were canceled, and contractors were told to halt work. But the real reason behind this decision left scientists unsettled for decades. Some rumors argued that Morgan believed the project was never immediately profitable. Others claimed that Morgan knew that a system promising free or widely available power would undermine established investments, something that could affect him one way or another. Whatever the motive, the effect was the same. Wardenclyffe's lifeline was cut, and the construction and testing that depended on steady funding could not continue. When funding disappeared, the project collapsed almost immediately. The team that had been assembled to manage construction, electrical work, and technical testing found itself without pay or supplies. The practical work of building a large, tuned transmitter depends on continuous effort and steady resupply. Once that cadence broke, the site could not maintain momentum. What remained at the tower were partially completed structures, gear in storage, and a plan that could not be executed. But the pressure didn't stop there. It got worse for Tesla. Not too long after, inspectors arrived claiming authority to examine the site. They reportedly moved through Tesla's workshops and laboratories, looking at apparatus, notes, and drawings. They inspected coils, measuring devices, and buried conduits. At least some of the documents and papers that had been part of Tesla's working collection were removed or vanished in the following days. The loss of technical notes reportedly hit Tesla really hard. His work relied heavily on carefully recorded measurements, coil geometries, and phase relationships, material that could not easily be recreated from memory. The combination of funding collapse and intrusive scrutiny had practical consequences and eventually took a toll on Tesla. Sadly, he responded in ways that changed him. He grew quieter and more isolated. He stopped pursuing another project on the scale of Wardenclyffe. Multiple reports claimed that he declined ambitious construction efforts after that moment. Over time, Wardenclyffe stood empty. The tower, the dome, the sheds, and the buried works were left exposed to weather and theft. As debts mounted, the remaining hardware was eventually dismantled and sold for scrap. Men with saws and wagons removed timber and metal. The dome and mast were taken down, and whatever copper or brass could be recovered found its way to buyers. Tesla did not physically resist the demolition, a sign of his resignation and an acknowledgement of the practical reality of the failure of this project. The destruction of Wardenclyffe closed the practical chapter of Tesla's large-scale wireless ambitions. It removed a physical place where ideas could be tested at scale, and it erased that apparatus. The loss also changed how his later claims and designs were received. Without a functioning demonstration site, future discussions about global wireless power remained theoretical and rhetorical rather than demonstrable through a built system. After Tesla's death, what remained of his papers and machines was treated in ways researchers have deemed unfair. Some were collected, some were seized, and some were quietly lost. The missing journals. When Nikola Tesla died alone in the New Yorker hotel on January 7, 1943, the world lost one of its most inventive scientific minds. But in the hours that followed his death, something very shocking began to unfold, and it involved government agents, sealed trunks, and documents that would never fully resurface. Tesla had been a U.S. citizen for decades, yet his papers were treated as if they belonged to a foreign national. Within a day, representatives from the Office of Alien Property entered his room and took possession of everything he left behind. The seizure was immediate and complete. Trunks filled with notebooks, diagrams, calculations, and partial manuscripts were collected, locked, and removed. Tesla had spent years recording his ideas in great detail, not just finished inventions, but also theories, experiments, and proposals that had never been published. Much of this material focused on subjects that had defined his later career and other work that grew out of his earlier experiments. Those papers were now in government hands, and for the first time since Tesla had written them, they became closed to the outside world. Among the seized items were notebooks related to his long-standing interest in wireless energy. Many of these were believed to connect directly to the research that shaped the Wardenclyffe project. Tesla had kept careful notes on tuned circuits, ground currents, and frequency behavior, the kind of material that would have been essential for recreating or understanding the principles behind his large-scale experiments. These notebooks were removed along with charts, sketches, and correspondence that could have clarified aspects of his unfinished work. The government also collected Tesla's papers on his resonance experiments. He had spent years exploring how electrical pulses moved through the natural world, how they could grow stronger under the right conditions, and how that power might be sent across huge distances. His work in Colorado Springs was the starting point, but the upgraded versions, the fine-tuned calculations, and the adjustments meant for Wardenclyffe were all kept in his private files. Those were taken too. They were logged, boxed up, and stored away with no public explanation, leaving another missing chapter in Tesla's unfinished story. One of the most surprising things in the collection was Tesla's writing on something he called teleforce, later hyped as the death ray. This wasn't some sci-fi fantasy to him. Tesla genuinely believed he could create a focused energy weapon. No one knows if his notes held a full blueprint or just rough ideas, but we do know the papers were taken and officially logged by the government. And right beside them were documents about atmospheric conductivity. Tesla's effort to figure out how the upper layers of the Earth's atmosphere might carry electrical power across long distances. The seized materials were logged, but the inventory itself raises eyebrows. Several entries connected to Wardenclyffe and its core ideas were marked only as relocated. No reason given, no follow-up notes, no public trail showing where anything actually went. Some researchers argue the government stepped in mainly to keep Tesla's more advanced concepts, especially anything related to his death ray or potential weapons, out of the hands of rival nations. And that theory makes sense. But the lack of a clear paper trail opens the door to even bigger questions. Where were those items taken? Who reviewed them? And why were they separated from the rest of Tesla's archive in the first place? Those blanks have never been filled in. Shortly after the seizure, a physicist from the National Defense Research Committee, the organization responsible for coordinating scientific work relevant to national security, was assigned to assess the material. His review was carried out quietly, without public announcement. After studying Tesla's notes, he reported that several documents dealing with wireless energy and resonant transmission had possible military or strategic value. This assessment ensured that certain papers remained restricted and contributed to the long-standing mystery surrounding what exactly had been found in Tesla's collection. Journalists and tech writers began digging into Nikola Tesla's estate because they suspected there was a lot more than just regular research in there. They did interviews and drafted early stories, and for a moment it looked like someone was about to crack open the deeper story. But then, everything stopped. One writer reportedly even pulled his article completely, citing vague pressures that made it impossible to keep going. He never got specific, and no updates were ever released. This pullback remains one of the only confirmed attempts by a reporter to go after the mystery of Tesla's missing journals. Workers who had been part of Wardenclyffe didn't shed any light on the situation either. After Tesla died, people tried reaching out to them, hoping for even the smallest clue. But every time, the answer was the same. Some flat-out refused interviews. Others admitted they worked there but wouldn't touch any questions about what actually happened at the tower. Maybe they were being loyal, maybe they were being careful, or maybe the memories had faded. No one really knows. What is clear is how unified that silence was, and because of it, a huge part of the Wardenclyffe story simply disappeared. The gap has stayed empty ever since. All of this leaves us with a broken, unfinished picture of Tesla's final legacy. On one side, we have the solid facts. The government stepped in, a military physicist reviewed his papers, some documents were classified, and the official inventories included odd entries no one has fully explained. But on the other side, there's everything that's missing. The pages that vanished, the journals that never reappeared, the items that were moved without any record of where they went, and the ideas Tesla was still developing when he died. Because of these gaps, historians can't rely on a full archive. Instead, they're forced to piece together his later work from old articles, public talks, and scattered bits that slipped through the cracks. It's a legacy built on fragments, and the missing pieces might be the most important part. But over to you, why do you think Tesla's materials were seized by the government after his death? Drop your answers in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click on the next video on your screen, like this video, and subscribe to our channel for more updates.